I've always liked being out in the woods by myself. It's a break from the rest of the world, just me, nature, and some long stretches of quiet. I set out early in the morning with my gear loaded in the back of my car. It was supposed to be a weekend trip, hike into a spot I'd heard about, set up my tent, and spend a day or two hunting. When I got there, I was pleased to find the place nearly empty. The trail parking area was small, and not a single vehicle was in sight. Perfect. I hiked in, found a decent spot near a creek, and pitched my tent. By afternoon, I had a small campfire going and was enjoying a quick meal before heading out with my rifle. I walked deeper into the forest, following a faint trail that eventually vanished beneath fallen leaves. After a while, I thought I saw someone else moving between the trees. He was far off, just a shape flickering through the gaps in the branches. My first thought was another hunter, but he wasn't on any trail I recognized. He was weaving through dense brush, moving quickly. I considered calling out to let him know I was there, just basic safety protocol, but I held back. Something about how he was moving made me uneasy, like he was deliberately trying not to be seen. Eventually, he vanished from sight. I chalked it up to my imagination and carried on. I didn't have any luck hunting that day. The sun started dipping low, so I trudged back to my campsite. The forest was absolutely still, not a breeze, not a single chirp of a bird. Sometimes the woods can feel eerily quiet, but I tried not to let it bother me. I ate a quick dinner by my campfire and then ducked into my tent to get some sleep. Sometime in the night, I was jolted awake by a distant cracking sound. It took me a moment to realize it was a gunshot, then another. It wasn't necessarily odd to hear gunshots if there were other hunters around, but this was well after dark, and the hunting area was restricted to daylight hours. My pulse quickened, but I tried to calm myself. Accidents happen, or maybe it was just someone chasing off a wild animal. I was drifting in and out of uneasy sleep when I heard something else. Soft, shuffling footsteps just outside my tent. My heart pounded so loudly that I was sure they could hear it. The steps paused, and then I heard a muffled whisper. Another voice responded. I couldn't catch every word, but I heard something like, "Should we check inside?" My mind was racing. Check inside. Did they mean my tent? I stayed still, barely daring to breathe. For several seconds I heard rustling, and then one of them said, "Not now. Let's go." The footsteps moved away, fading into the darkness. I don't know how long I lay there, straining to hear any hint that they might come back. Eventually, I decided it was too risky to spend the rest of the night. I quietly gathered my essentials, stepped out as silently as possible, and hurried to where I'd parked my car. The entire walk felt like something out of a nightmare. Every snap of a twig made me jump. I kept imagining those voices right behind me. When I reached my car, I threw my gear in the trunk and sped off, not caring if I scraped the bottom on the rough road. My only thought was putting as much distance between me and that campsite as possible. Adrenaline kept my hands tight on the steering wheel. Finally, I made it to the highway. It was late, well past midnight, and I could barely keep my eyes open. My plan was to find the nearest motel, just to be in a place with other people around. About an hour later, I spotted a flickering neon sign that promised vacancy. I pulled in, parked, and checked in. The woman at the front desk barely looked up from her phone as she handed me the key. Inside the room, I tried to settle down, but my nerves were shot. The place was shabby, dim lighting, a musty smell, stained carpet. It was still safer than the campsite, though, so I threw my bag on the chair and sank onto the bed. I just needed a couple of hours of sleep, I told myself. Then I'd figure out what to do in the morning. Around 3 a.m, I was stirred by the sound of something scraping outside. I thought maybe it was just the wind. Then I heard a soft tap on the window. I froze and listened. Another tap. Slowly, I got out of bed, heart thrumming, and moved toward the window. The curtain was thin, but in the dim security light outside, I saw a tall silhouette. Someone was definitely out there. Before I could decide what to do, there was a knock at the door. My stomach lurched. With my voice shaking, I called out, "Who is it?" A man's voice responded quietly, "I need to talk to you about the forest incident." My head started to spin. Forest incident? There's no way this was just a coincidence. I quietly slid the chain lock into place on the door and grabbed my phone. I told him to leave, but he said he just had to settle something. His tone was almost polite, which made it more unnerving. Without waiting for another second, I called the police. I only managed to sputter out a few words, something about a strange man trying to talk to me about gunshots in the forest. The dispatcher said officers were on their way and told me to stay inside. I stood there, phone in hand, waiting. The man spoke again from behind the door, but I couldn't make out what he said. Then, everything fell silent. No footsteps, no more knocking, nothing. When the police arrived, surprisingly fast, they found no one outside. They asked me a few questions, shone their flashlights around the parking lot, and took my statement. There was no sign of the man. They checked the security cameras, but the motel's system was old and apparently out of order. I had nothing but my word about what happened. The officers left after telling me to lock my door and call them if anything else came up. I was wide awake, adrenaline still coursing through me. I didn't sleep at all for the rest of the night. At dawn, I checked out and drove straight home, trying to make sense of everything. Maybe the shots were from poachers, or maybe something else was going on in those woods. That man, I still have no clue who he was. Was he one of the voices I heard in my tent? Was he the same figure I saw among the trees? Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. I'd been working at this small marketing firm in San Diego for a couple of years. My boss, Trent, wasn't the greatest guy, always pinching pennies, always telling me to figure it out whenever I brought up concerns. So when he told me I had to attend a big conference in Phoenix, I figured he'd at least cover a decent hotel. But no. Trent gave me the bare minimum travel budget, basically enough gas to get there and maybe a couple of cheap meals. I should have pushed back, but I needed this job, you know? So I packed my bag, hopped in my old sedan, and made the 6-hour drive. The plan was to stay 3 nights in Phoenix, meet with a few potential clients, and report back to the office. Simple enough. The only problem was that the budget was a joke. It wasn't going to get me anywhere near a respectable hotel. That's how I ended up at the Westridge Motel on the outskirts of Phoenix. It was the kind of place you see once and never want to see again. Dim lights, a parking lot littered with broken bottles, a neon sign buzzing like a fly. But it was cheap, and I had no other options. I checked in, carried my suitcase up the creaking outdoor stairs, and tried not to think about the weird smell in the hallway. The room itself was just as depressing. Mismatched furniture, thin walls, and a single flickering lamp by the bed. Still, I told myself it was only for a few nights. I just needed a place to sleep. Here's the thing, though. I'd been feeling uneasy for weeks. It was something I couldn't quite place, like the sensation that someone's watching you. I'd catch glimpses of a figure in a dark hoodie when I was grocery shopping or walking to my car after work. At first, I brushed it off. A city's a city. People wear hoodies all the time. But then I realized I was seeing the same person. The same way they stood, same color jacket, same height. It could have just been a coincidence. But it kept happening, at random spots, near my apartment, behind me at a coffee shop, parked down the street. I started to worry, but life got busy. I had this conference to prepare for, so I ignored it, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Until I got to Phoenix. I spotted that hoodie outside a gas station off the freeway. My stomach dropped. Could it be the same person, hundreds of miles away? I convinced myself it couldn't be. But that night, as I left the conference center late, I saw someone in the same dark hoodie leaning against a wall. They stepped back into the shadows when I glanced over. My heart hammered. I almost called the cops right then, but I had no proof of anything, just a bad feeling. Back at the motel, I locked my door, then used one of those flimsy chain latches. I turned on the TV for background noise and tried to focus on my notes for tomorrow's meeting. Every so often, I'd hear people talking in the hall or a car revving up outside and I'd jump. My nerves were shot. A few hours later, I decided to go down to the reception desk for some water. The vending machine in the hallway was broken. As soon as I stepped outside my room, I got that sensation again, like someone was behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing there. I went down the stairs, turned the corner, and then I froze. Standing near the front office window was the hoodie figure. Same stance, same silhouette. my mouth went dry. Instinct kicked in, and I ducked behind an SUV in the parking lot, heart pounding. I peered over the car's hood. The figure was looking around, searching. The overhead light cast just enough glow for me to see their face, pale, tense, eyes scanning the lot. I thought about running back to my room, but that felt too exposed. I couldn't stay crouched in the parking lot all night, though. My phone was in my pocket, but my mind was racing too fast to think about calling anyone. After a moment of hesitation, I crept toward the motel's front office door, trying to stick to the shadows. Right then, the figure turned and spotted me. I saw them stiffen, then break into a run, heading straight for me. I bolted, nearly slipped on a patch of oil. I crashed through the motel's glass door into the reception area, gasping for breath. The night clerk, a tired-looking guy with a name tag that read Eddie, jumped up, startled. Before I could say a word, the door slammed open behind me. The hooded person lunged at me, and I stumbled backward, banging into a magazine rack. Eddie shouted something, but it was all a blur. I felt hands grab me and yank at my jacket. A voice hissed, "You can't keep ignoring me," though I swear I didn't even know who they were. My mind was a mess. I was terrified. Next thing I knew, Eddie and another staff member, maybe a security guy, were pulling the attacker off me. The hoodie ripped as they wrestled the stranger to the floor. I saw a flash of silver in the person's hand, a knife, I think, but it clattered away. My body shook, adrenaline ripping through my veins. Eddie yelled for someone to call the police. A few other guests poked their heads in, eyes wide. I was still on the ground, my back against the magazine rack, trying to catch my breath. My attacker thrashed and cursed, but the staff held tight until the cops arrived. The police came pretty quickly, sirens echoing in the parking lot. They handcuffed the stranger, who kept shouting about how I owed them something. But I never got the full story. I had no idea who they were or why they'd been following me. The officers took my statement, and I gave them every detail I could remember about the hoodie, the strange feeling of being watched, everything. Eventually, they led the attacker away. I just stood there, watching them disappear into the back of a squad car. Eddie asked if I was okay and offered me a glass of water. I nodded, still in shock. By the time they finished the paperwork, the sun was starting to rise. I checked out of that motel as soon as I could. I ended up sleeping in my car for a few hours in a Walmart parking lot just to avoid going back. I never heard any updates from the police. No calls, no explanations. For all I know, the person got arraigned, or maybe they got out on bail. I was halfway home, somewhere in Texas, just after visiting my parents for the holidays. I'm 32, single, and usually careful when traveling alone, but I'd been on the road all day. My eyes burned, my shoulders ached. I just needed a place to crash for the night. The motel looked cheap, flickering neon sign, peeling paint, but it was the only option for miles. I pulled into the lot and noticed just 2 cars parked there. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I stepped into the lobby. The man behind the desk looked young, maybe mid-20s, sweaty forehead, nervous eyes. He glanced at me like I was intruding. A name tag on his shirt read Jeff, with the corners of the plastic cracked. I asked for a room. He nodded fast and typed something into the old computer. No conversation, just a fidgety energy that made my stomach knot. Still, I brushed it off. I was exhausted. I paid in cash and took my key. The room was dull. A thin bed, worn carpet, flickering lamp. I dropped my bag near the door and sat on the bed, trying to ignore the stale odor. My head felt heavy. I wanted to sleep, but something kept nagging me. Maybe it was the memory of the desk clerk's darting eyes. I couldn't get comfortable. My mind replayed the long drive, my dad's goodbye hug, and my mom's worry about me driving alone. I told her I'd be fine, but I wasn't so sure now. Eventually, I gave in and lay down. The sheets felt stiff against my arms. I thought I'd drift off in seconds. Then I heard a faint noise out in the hall. Soft footsteps, pausing right outside my door. My heart thumped. I tried to ignore it, but the footsteps returned. Then a low sound, like someone messing with the doorknob. I shot up. My body tensed. I peered through the peephole, half expecting no one to be there. But there he was, Jeff, the same guy from the lobby. He was hunched forward, fiddling with what looked like a small key or a tool. My mind raced. My phone was in my pocket. I thought about calling the police, but we were in the middle of nowhere. How fast could they even get here? My hands shook. I backed away from the door, wondering if I should confront him or stay quiet. Then the door creaked. The lock turned, just a bit. Panic shot through me. I rushed to the dresser and yanked it, trying to wedge it against the door. My muscles strained, adrenaline screaming through my veins. The door opened a crack. I saw his arm, then part of his face. He was holding a knife. My stomach lurched. This wasn't just some nosy clerk. He was breaking in. "No!" I yelled. It wasn't much, but I needed him to know I was awake and ready. He froze for a second, then pushed harder. The dresser screeched across the floor. His knife glinted under the flickering light. I grabbed for anything I could use. A lamp, its cord tangling around my wrist. He lunged forward, jabbing with the blade. I swung the lamp. It crashed into his shoulder. He stumbled. I didn't think. I moved on instinct. I lunged, gripping his wrist. The knife swung wildly. My heart hammered so loud it felt like it might burst. He snarled, spit flecking at his mouth, eyes wide in some crazed expression. We wrestled by the bed. I kicked at his knee. He dropped the knife. Then he scrambled for it, but I was faster. I grabbed it off the floor, my hand trembling around the handle. He lunged again, cursing under his breath. I lashed out, not even sure how I aimed. The blade grazed his arm. A dark spot bloomed on his sleeve. He howled, then shoved me aside, stumbling toward the door. I stood there, chest heaving, knife still in hand. Blood smeared on the carpet. My mind screamed to call the police, but he was bolting out. I heard him run down the hallway, shoes squeaking against the tile. I rushed to the lobby phone, hoping there was some direct line. The lobby was empty. I tried the landline, but it crackled uselessly. No dial tone, of course. I ran back to my room, grabbed my cell, and dialed 911. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped it. The dispatcher sounded calm. She told me to lock myself somewhere safe and wait for the authorities. I didn't feel safe in that motel. Blood was on the carpet. The hallway was dark. Who knew if Jeff had accomplices or if he'd come back? I couldn't just stand there. So I bolted outside, jumped in my car, and sped off down the road. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking where I was. I gave my best guess, rattling off the last rote sign I remembered. Then I saw him again. He was limping away from the motel, heading toward the trees at the edge of the property. He clutched his arm, blood dripping. My foot pressed the gas pedal without thinking. I didn't want him near me. I just wanted distance. Eventually, sirens wailed behind me. 2 squad cars roared by, lights flooding the night. I pulled over, letting them pass. Another officer arrived minutes later and found me parked on the shoulder, shaking with shock. I told him what happened. My words spilled out in broken pieces. He told me to stay put and wait for a statement. By then, more backup arrived. They circled back to the motel. I heard later how they found Jeff's blood trail. It led from the parking lot into a small patch of forest behind the motel. Drops of it marked the dirt and leaves. They tracked him right to a clearing. He'd crouched against a tree, clutching that wound. He was frantic, muttering something about needing money. They took him away in cuffs. A newly hired employee, apparently. The manager claimed no knowledge and said the man was hired on short notice. When the officers let me go, I finally booked a new motel in the next town. I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment. His face, the blade, the horrible shuffle of feet on the cheap carpet. The next morning, I gave a written statement. They assured me it was self-defense. Still, the guilt gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the image of him slumped against that tree, bleeding,